Great. So Emily, I'm happy to go live. You just give me the high sign.
You're good to go.
Great. Wonderful. Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to this New England Canada Business Council webinar. We are wonderfully blessed to have Bill Prestansky and Bruce Hartley with us today from Prospectus Associates to give us their expert insight into the Canadian parliamentary elections coming up on Monday. So this event could not be more timely. I want to give a special shout out to Len Gold from our board of directors for making the connection between NECBC and Bruce and Bill for today's event. I also note I'm very grateful to have several members of our board of directors who have joined us today. Andrew Holman, I see Len Gold, Steve Leahy, Marie-Claude Francoeur from the Quebec delegation. I note also with gratitude that the Consul General, Roger Kusner, is with us today. We'll be staying strictly apolitical, but thank you to Roger and to the consulate for your support. Also extremely grateful to Rasky Partners for their sponsorship, making today's event possible. Rasky Partners is a deeply respected public affairs, public relations firm in Boston and Washington. And I want to introduce Jeff Terry from Rasky Partners, just to say a few words, Jeff.
Great. Well, thanks so much, Peter. And thanks so much for letting us participate in this. I'm really excited to hear what Bruce and Bill have to say. For political junkies like me, this has been an exciting couple days. We had the California recall election yesterday. We had an exciting preliminary election here in Boston for mayor and city council. And so excited to hear what Bruce and Bill have to say and their predictions for what's happening next week.
Great. Well, Jeff, thank you very much. And again, deep thanks to Rasky Associates for your sponsorship of this event and also a follow-up event. Watch your email inboxes for an after the election recap coming up next Wednesday, the 22nd at noon, and we'll have more details about that coming out soon. So let me turn now to the main attraction today. Bill Prestansky and Bruce from Prospectus Associates. Obviously, everybody's read your bios, but I'd love to give both of you a chance to just say a little more by way of introducing yourselves, who you are, and your particular insight into the election.
Sure. Bill Prestansky. I worked for Mr. Mulrooney in his leadership in 1983, and he asked me to be his executive assistant. I went up to Ottawa, and he asked me to come up for 2 years. I've never left, and was executive assistant to him as prime minister, and then he assigned me several other roles in the government before I finally escaped and founded Prospectus Associates in 1991. And we've been, it's 30 years. So we've been running a boutique lobby operation here in the nation's capital. And we're very fortunate that Mr. Hartley joined us after his time with Jean Chrétien. I'll let him tell us all about that.
Yeah, thanks, Bill. But what Bill was really saying is we can all check out, but we can never leave. That's the problem with Ottawa and any of the political world, actually. Yes, I worked in the entire time of the Jean Chrétien Prime Minister's office. Like Bill, I was executive assistant, and those were great years. And it was interesting because it came after Brian Mulroney left, and Bill and I always make the joke that the ultimate political battle that never took place were the two titans of what we say Canadian politics, of Brian Mulroney and Jean Chrétien. Would have been a great campaign had he stuck around. But you know, Brian knew he was going to lose in '93, and that's why he stepped away, right, Bill?
He actually had made a commitment to Mila that he would do this for 2 terms, and when he suggested to her that he might stay on and run against Chrétien for the 3rd term, she said, "Well, that's great, and I know your next wife will enjoy it." So yeah.
And Mr. Chrétien did the same thing. He promised to retire before the age of 70, and he did it 1 month and basically 1 month before he turned 70.
Great.
Donc, so hi everybody and bonjour tout le monde. Je vois des Marie-Claude, Colette, Marc-Antoine. Thank you for joining us today, and everybody else. Thanks. Over to you, Peter.
Great. Well, so let's kick it off. I want to put both of you on the spot a little bit and ask you for your predictions, what the outcome will be of Monday's election, and also how confident you're feeling about those predictions. Maybe we'll start with Bruce.
Okay. I was on the campaign trail last night in Brampton at a big rally, and I can tell you that there's certainly in the last, really since the debates, the French debates, there's been a renewed swing in the Liberal momentum. Mr. O'Toole peaked quite early in the month of August, and after Labor Day, a lot of people started tuning in, and that's when the debates took place. And certainly, listen, it's not a cakewalk in any sense of the term. I know the MPs and candidates having some challenges at the doors, but we're still seeing a very tight race. And, you know, on any given 3-day run, Nanos has either, you know, Prime Minister Trudeau ahead or he has O'Toole ahead by a couple points. So frankly, it's a statistical tie. However, the Liberal vote is much more efficient across the country, which gives me the confidence that Trudeau will come out ahead with more seats next Monday.
By efficient, Bruce, tell us what you mean using that word for efficient vote.
The Conservatives' traditional base is Alberta, Saskatchewan, and they can have, you know, 55, 60% in the polls, which sort of skewers the national percentages. And so, whereas the Prime Minister, the Liberals rather, have, you know, a base support in Atlantic Canada, they have support in Quebec, they have some very strong support in the urban centers and the vote-rich Ontario. And then, of course, in BC, BC is always a three-way race. And so anyone who says they can predict BC or they don't know, you know, they don't really know what they're talking about. You never know until the votes come in. And I think BC is going to play an important role on Monday night as we see a very tight race. But right now, my understanding is that, you know, the Liberals in Ontario are still holding their lead. And that's critical to maintaining minority government next week.
Bill Prstansky for what I think will be a slightly different viewpoint.
Thanks, Peter. Yeah, slightly different. I think Bruce will probably admit that no matter what happens on Monday night when the returns are coming in, Prime Minister Trudeau is the big loser in this campaign. He very selfishly, during a pandemic, wildfires raging in British Columbia and Afghanistan falling to the Taliban, he very selfishly decided to call an election, an unneeded election, an unnecessary election, to try and get a majority, thinking of his own political superiority, that he would just braze through this. So I think he's going to be under a lot of pressure, whether he's 10 seats in front or 10 seats behind O'Toole on election night to start the process of finding a new Liberal leader. Because the majority was what this is all about, and it's not possible. I think every pundit across the country is now saying that that's out of reach. I do think that Quebec is playing probably the pivotal role in this election. I actually disagree with Bruce on BC being important, in the sense I think this is over. Once we have the returns in from Ontario, as we head west, we'll know whether Mr. O'Toole is going to be Prime Minister or not. I think that there's huge shifts going on in Quebec right now. And if you look historically in Canada, going all the way back to John Diefenbaker, what happens in Quebec decides the country. They have such an enormous amount of seats, and they're and they are a distinct society, and they're strategic voters, and they vote in waves. And if they sense this weekend, which they may, that Aaron O'Toole is leading in English Canada, they will shift their voting pattern in an enormous way. the premier, who's very popular, probably the most popular premier, a strong leader, and Quebecers love strong leaders, taking them through this pandemic. He's very popular. He's endorsed Aaron O'Toole, and also you'll find this to be almost an oxymoron, but the English language. So in Canada, we had 2 French language debates, 1 English language debate for the leaders, and the English language debate probably had more influence on Quebec voters who weren't even watching it. But the first question from the moderator indicated that they thought Bill 21 was discriminatory. And she asked the Bloc Québécois leader. The Bloc Québécois leader then pounced on that as an affront on Quebec and all Quebecers. And by English Canada, it's dominated the French media ever since. Everybody has condemned her for what she said, and the Bloc is going up in the region. So whatever happens in Quebec is going to decide this election, and the shifting is going to happen. I think Bruce is wrong about the bedrock Atlantic Canada support for Trudeau. I think the Nova Scotia provincial election, which happened a couple of days into this campaign, where the incumbent Liberal government was thrown out of office by the Conservatives, the first government to actually lose an election during the pandemic. We had several provincial elections where the status quo was maintained, or where minority governments became majority governments. But I think you're going to see a big change. I think the Conservatives are going to win seats in all 4 Atlantic provinces, and so that bedrock support doesn't exist either. Ontario is important because, as you know, in Southern Ontario and what we call the 905 area code around the city of Toronto, those seats are very, very important. And right now we're seeing a big shift towards O'Toole. Basically, and I'll just end on this, basically, I think Canadians were ready to toss Justin Trudeau out of office in the last election, but they looked at Andrew Scheer, who was a social conservative, and they just felt uncomfortable with that. But this time, Aaron O'Toole has presented himself as basically a progressive conservative. His platform is progressive. He's taken big issues like climate change and other issues off the table. He is pro-choice. And so I think Canadians are very uncomfortable with Trudeau's leadership. They know there's someone to turn to. So I'm very hopeful that on election night, we're going to have 10 or 20 more seats in the Liberals, and Aaron O'Toole will form the next government.
Mr. Hartley for equal time.
Thank you, Peter. Well, first of all, I'm not sure where to start in that, but I'll start with, I like to give Nova Scotians a little more credit. They can vote one way provincially and certainly vote another way federally.
You see, Roger is nodding his head.
He's not allowed to say anything, but nodding ahead is.
He's an honorary Nova Scotian now that he's a Bostonian and spending a lot of time at Fenway Park, I hope.
No, I don't think you compare what happened in the provincial election to what can happen federally, because a whole different set of circumstances and a government that have been there a lot longer. I guess I'll agree with Bill on the importance of Quebec. I was just talking about, I don't think we'll necessarily have an answer by the time we get to the Ontario-Manitoba border. I think Quebec is in flux. I disagree, I think, with the Premier. I think the Premier made an error in his intervention in the campaign, making an endorsement. I think Mélanie Joly made a great response where he said, we Quebecers don't like to be told how to vote. And I think it also cuts a different way, certainly with Ontarians seeing a provincial premier, especially a conservative premier in Ontario, who told his whole cabinet and his own staff not to get involved in the campaign and to stay out. So I think those are different aspects that will play in as people go in to vote. There's been a high number of people who have gone ahead to vote in advance polls. I think that has more to do with COVID rules and people wanting to avoid long lineups. I don't believe this is a change election, as Bill is saying that the last one was, and this one was definitely. I think that, and the other important thing to note here is with minority governments, the prime minister, minority governments barely last 2 years, 2 years and a half at most. We have a history. Bill made reference to Diefenbaker. We have Diefenbaker. We have Pearson. We have Trudeau. We have Harper. They're all people who called elections. Now, I guess the NDP brought down Trudeau at one point. They caused that election. But if there wasn't an election now, if you're prime minister, are you going to call an election when you think that it's the best conditions to win, or do you wait till you're defeated in the House and everybody else thinks it's in their best conditions to beat the prime minister in an election in a minority situation? So this wasn't selfish. It was a situation where I believe the government saw that we were climbing up 75-80% of people being vaccinated. The fourth wave hadn't started really, and the fourth wave is not something that affects 80% of the people right now. Certainly in Alberta, where their provincial rules in terms of pandemic did not meet the rigorous health standards of other provinces. That was, they wanted to do it before school started. So I don't believe that it's not a selfish thing at all. It was good political timing by the Liberal government.
Agree to disagree. We'll have you agree to disagree on that. I'd love to put to both of you 338 ridings. How many seats do you think are actually in play in this election?
Well, we poll 70 seats a night with a rolling poll. I'm sure the Liberals are polling about the same number, and probably 55 of them are the same. I would say right now there's probably 50 seats that could go either way, and that will determine the outcome of the election. So I think the other factor is who can get out the vote best. Certainly, I will give the Liberals credit for having a better analytic AI system developed by Mr. Pitfield, who is a lifelong friend of Tom Pitfield. His father was a very close confidant of Prime Minister Trudeau the first. And they developed an analytics AI system based on what the Democrats were doing in the United States for 2015, which was very effective. They then formed a company. They fought 20 elections around the world. They fought 2019 here for the Liberals. So we're playing catch up on that. We're using a UK firm that we retained 6 months ago. So we're years behind. So that gives the Liberals potentially the edge on getting the vote out. One of the problems in a summer election, one of the problems in 2021 is, and with COVID, is getting volunteers on the ground to knock on doors and to determine where your vote is has been very difficult to identify the vote. So getting the vote out will be difficult. But I will say this, that one of the things because of COVID, the Elections Canada was they have had a lot of trouble hiring poll workers. And so they have had to, in many urban areas especially, they've had to cut down the number of polling stations to about half of what they normally are. And because of COVID, schools where most polling stations have been in the past are not allowing polling stations to take place in schools. And so if you think about the average voter who walks down on election day to his local school to vote and finds out that that's not where his polling station is, if you're a status quo supporter of the Liberal Party, you might just go home and go about your daily business. If you really want to throw the bums out, as we say in politics, you go home, you look at your voting card, you get on the internet, you find out where you go and vote. So I do think that it may shift the advantage to the Conservatives in the sense that people that want to change the government will work harder at finding the polling station and getting out the vote. People will also come to a polling station and find out the lineup is an hour long. And if you want to change the government, you'll stand for an hour. And if you think, well, Justin's going to win anyway, you go home. So a lot of factors, but getting out the vote and who actually votes. They did think there were going to be 5 million mail-in ballots, but they're not seeing that. There'd probably be 1 million, most coming from BC, where provincially they're used to mail-in ballots. So that probably won't be as big a factor. And they were thinking maybe it would take 2 or 3 days to get the result, but I don't think that'll be the case.
Yeah. Peter, I think
your thoughts.
Yeah, I like for all our American listeners, I mean, the sort of the equivalent corollary is that, if you look at any presidential election in the United States, that the Deep South, Texas, and sort of Midwest are going to go Republican. The both coasts are going to go Democrat, and then you have battleground states like, well, in the last election, like Georgia, North Carolina, and others. In Canada, it's very similar. And Bill says 50 seats. My calculation discussion was others. I think it's down to 40. It's that tight. And I think it's really important for everybody for the next few days, watch where all the leaders go. This isn't ticking off, I went to Northern Saskatchewan. They are going to strategic ridings where they think they can make a difference.
Right.
The interesting thing though about the Trudeau trip so far in the last few days, he's been going to ridings they hold. So it's kind of like save the furniture, where O'Toole is going to new ridings that they expect to win. So it does show a level of confidence and it may be overconfidence, but there is a level of confidence that differs. The other thing that I think we should—
I thought O'Toole was running his campaign out of the Westin Hotel. What are you talking about? Is he getting out?
He has been using technology to meet voters across the country using modern technology like we're using today. And he honed his skills doing that in leadership last year, where we were forced to do that. And I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I think, we're not far away from all elections taking place in a television studio, and people getting on planes and crisscrossing the country, I think will become a thing of the past. But he's venturing into Quebec region tonight with a big guest speaker, which should have a lot of interest. But I did want to take a moment to explain to the American audience, to the Americans here. I mean, there's obviously a lot of Canadians watching this as well, but to our American friends, the difference in our voting, of course, is you can't vote for the president, prime minister, and then vote for your local member of parliament. So because it's a parliamentary system, you vote for your local member of parliament, and then the leader and the party that gets the most number of seats in parliament has a right to form a government. And so it's a little different. So this has really become a referendum on the leaders and people going to the polls. It's all about who do you want to lead the next government. There's really no issue in the sense climate change, even COVID, abortion rights. These issues I don't think are part of the ballot question. The ballot question is who do you trust to— now, if the ballot question is who do you trust to take us into economic recovery, I think O'Toole wins. If the ballot question is who do you trust because he's taking you through the first three waves to get us through the next fourth, fifth, sixth wave of COVID, then it could be Trudeau. But it is really a referendum on leader. But people have to vote for their local member of parliament.
Yes, that's right. It's fusion of powers, and cabinet is chosen out of elected officials who are sitting in the House of Commons, right? So just imagine if President Biden had to show up to Congress every day and answer questions, and his cabinet. It would make things more fun and lively, wouldn't it? I just want— go ahead, sir.
Bruce, maybe start with you. The roles that you see, the NDP, the Bloc Québécois, the Greens, the People's Party of Canada, how big a role you see them playing and where in the outcome?
That's a really interesting question, Peter, because, Mr. O'Toole, Bill talked about him moving to the center, but really what he has is a very fractured base where you have Alberta Conservatives, you have a separatist movement called the Maverick Party, who's a big dent, but they're a voice out west. The PPC, on the one hand, is the leader of the PPC was the gentleman who almost won the Conservative leadership. He lost by a hair, by just a few votes, and in the previous leadership, not against O'Toole, but against Scheer. And so he's gone out and he's scorned, and he's trying to take votes away from the Conservatives, and his vote percentage has definitely gone up. And I think there's going to be an effect. It's not just out west. I mean, we saw it in the last election where even a couple of percentage points or 1.5 made, when you have 1,000 vote results, I mean, a party that takes, 1,500 votes makes a difference for someone to win. So, and the other side of his PPC, what's interesting, what I will say for American friends is it almost like feels like the spillover from the last presidential election. There are people showing up at these rallies who are anti-vaxxers, anti-mask, wearing MAGA hats. It's fascinating, and they're angry, and that's what Monsieur Bernier, who's the leader of this group, is tapping into and sort of pumping up for his own political purposes. The Bloc Québécois, what's really interesting is that they don't even have the word separation in their documents, in their platform documents, and they're not running on that platform this year. It's all about, we represent, elect us, we'll represent your interests, the Quebec interests. Interestingly enough, yesterday, Monsieur Blanchette, who has, as Bill said earlier, been riding this wave of what happened in the English debate, was saying to the Acadians and Francophones outside of Quebec, hey, I'm going to be your voice in Parliament. Well, the president of the Acadian Association yesterday canceled a meeting and said, no, Monsieur Blanchette, you don't speak for me. I have members of Parliament. I have Francophone members across this country who aren't from Quebec who can speak for Francophones at the federal level. And you don't. And they canceled the meeting. So that kind of backfired on Mr. Blanchette. He's a very confident man, and I think some of his approach has hurt him, certainly with the regular people in Quebec. And having the Premier of Quebec endorse the Conservatives hurts Mr. Blanchette as well, which is a fascinating effect, because it could elect some Liberals if it splits enough seats. If the Conservatives come up high enough, Bloc come down, the Liberals can come up the middle, and that's what I think we'll see in a couple of places. Bill, do you want to talk about the Greens anyway, the
third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh parties?
Yeah.
So, I mean, simply on the People's Party, I think the first 3% is definitely coming from the Conservatives. I think after that, it's coming from all parties. I mean, it really is a conglomeration of anti-vaxxers is what it's turned out to be in this campaign. And there's anti-vaxxers among the Liberal supporters and NDP supporters as well. But Bruce is right. They could be a spoiler for the Conservatives in several ridings by just taking 3% of the vote, or even less. If you take 1,000 votes away from some of our candidates, it could mean the difference to losing the election. I agree. The Bloc, I still think they have 30 seats in the regions. And could stretch that to 40. And the fact that they have 30 or more just dictates that there will be no majority by either party. I think that the Greens, they've been a troubled party. They really aren't a political party. They never really have formulated a proper party. They were a one-person party with Elizabeth May, and now Elizabeth is still running, but they're not going to win more than 1 or 2 seats. Their leader did very well in the English debate, and she pointed out quite clearly to women in the country that Trudeau is not the feminist he claims to be. And then he proved it by sort of talking down to her, telling her that he didn't need to take any advice from her on caucus management, which I think he probably would want to take back. But they're not going to, they're polling about 3% right now nationally. There are pockets, though, in Atlantic Canada and in British Columbia and even parts of Southern Ontario where they're running credible candidates that could maybe in 2 or 3 or 4-way splits do much better than people think. And they might elect 2 or 3 more people unexpectedly. The NDP, Singh unfortunately seems to have hit a ceiling around 20%. I mean, if he had kept going with the momentum he had earlier in the campaign and gone to 23, 24, 25% nationally, that would really have ensured O'Toole would win this election. But he seems to stall out around 20%. And that's unfortunate for the Conservatives. He is doing really well in British Columbia and creating all kinds of 3-way splits there. Obviously, there's a provincial government there that's NDP, which is helping that. So again, who knows who comes up the middle in those 3-way splits in British Columbia, but they probably, that's where they'll have probably the most influence. Can they snag a few GTA seats? It remains to be seen. They're trying to win back Jack Layton's old seat along the Danforth in Toronto. He's been there multiple times. They're looking at Hamilton seats, obviously Windsor seats in Ontario and Northern Ontario. He spent a lot of time there. I'm not so sure he's going to make the breakthrough there that he thinks he will, though. And they'll probably lose their seat in Newfoundland just because it really wasn't an NDP seat. It was a seat owned by a very popular member of Parliament, just like Roger Cuzner was a very popular member of Parliament. There are certain areas of the country, especially rural Canada, where a popular member like Roger, and I send kudos out to him, he was a great member of Parliament, he represented Cape Breton very well over the many years, and you are so lucky to have him in Boston. He will be an incredible consul general. But I think that, you know, it became his seat. It was, people didn't go and vote for the prime minister when they voted for, they were voting for Roger. That happens in rural Canada. And so those seats, we don't bother polling because those good MPs will always win, no matter where the winds of change are blowing. And that's why Bruce and I are going to, you know, there's either 30, 40 or 50 seats that are going to decide this election.
Great. I want to go to Bruce in a moment for some reaction to that, but I want to invite everybody in the audience to please go ahead and submit your questions in the Q&A. And I just want to note that we've been joined by a number of other members of the NECBC board that I want to be sure to give a shout out to, certainly leading with John Sorensen, our president emeritus, Andrew Holman, Leo Desjardins, Lenton Gold, Lindsay Cook, Tim Egan, Tom Kent, again, Marie-Claude Francoeur, Steve Leahy, and Roger Cuzner, obviously getting lots of love from everybody at this event.
Everybody.
Bruce, let's just go back as the questions are coming in. Any reactions to Bill's observations?
Yeah, the one a nuance I'd add to this about the role of these other parties is that you have a situation where Bill may say that there's only 3%, but you see O'Toole won't take a stand on vaccinations for his candidates because he doesn't want to upset that side, hoping that those people will go in the ballot box and vote for him, right? He can sit there and say, I'm vaccinated, but he's not forcing his own or asking his own, his own candidates to vaccinate. So he's trying to reach out to the PPC. And of course, Prime Minister Trudeau, with his progressive agenda, is really trying to steal away those NDP votes. And they're really hoping the tree will shake a bit more and get Jagmeet Singh off the 20 down to 16 or 15. And I mean, that's the perpetual problem for NDP voters, because, you know, we're going to hear in the next couple of days, the Prime Minister is going to stand up and say, listen, a vote for the NDP is a vote for the Conservatives. And so,
and that's likewise, a vote for the People's Party is a vote for Justin Trudeau.
Yeah. So that's the role there. The Greens, I'll disagree a little bit about the Green leader. I don't think she was that effective. My mother lives in downtown Toronto, and her and her friends, they just, she's not connecting with any of certainly my mom's generation and her friends. She had zero expectations going to the debate, and she had, because of what had happened to her in her party, so she could only look better in the debate. And I wanted to throw in one other sort of riposte. Is the other thing that's to watch in the election campaign is we've seen both parties go negative, and it's really interesting. I think if Bill's very, very confident that Conservatives are doing well, but the leader's doing ad hominem attacks now on the Prime Minister. So hoping that will sort of shake some more votes. So that just shows, there's the negative campaign ads in the United States. I mean, negative campaign ads are just part of the tapestry of electoral politics. But in Canada, people still feign being shocked, but they do work, and as they do in the United States.
Yeah, look, I mean, it always was our plan to present Aaron O'Toole and his 160-page platform as a credible alternative to Justin Trudeau as Prime Minister. And so that's what the first 3.5 weeks of the campaign was all about. But right now, we find that we have to remind people why they don't like Justin Trudeau. And so that's what these ads are about. And quite frankly, the Liberals started before we did with negative ads about our leader. So it is what it is. The only other comment I'd make, Bruce is right on that, the difficulty of being the Conservative leader is you are trying to, it's such a broad, big blue tent that you're trying to keep everybody in. And so, Bruce is a little wrong when he says he's not encouraging his his candidates to be vaccinated. Aaron O'Toole, of course, is encouraging all Canadians to be vaccinated.
Wow.
Took
He
part in the
can't. He
video.
can't tell you how many of his folks are vaccinated. Bill, come on.
But he is skating on the fact that he's not mandating they're vaccinated because he wants to be open to those voters in the People's Party to get in the booth and say, well, you know, I like to be a protest vote, but on the other hand, if I do this and not vote for Aaron, I'm going to end up with Justin, so I'm going to vote for Aaron. So that's the kind of skating, just like Trudeau does on climate change and other issues, to get Greens and the NDP to leave their fringe parties to vote for him. So both parties have to do that. It's harder, I think, for Conservative because our coalition is broader. We actually allow some of our candidates to be pro-life, and where Mr. Trudeau, if you will not sign a document that you're pro-choice, other than the few that were grandfathered before he was a leader, they won't even sign your nomination papers. So we're a much more open and broader party.
Bruce, your reactions.
It's really important. I mean, Bill's saying this is a referendum on leadership, but there are issues in this campaign. Well, you know, climate change is very important, but the Conservatives have it buried in their platform document. There's gun control, which Mr. O'Toole, even though it's in black and white in the document about rescinding the present government's regulations on assault weapons, you know, so Mr. O'Toole's come out and said, no, that's not it. This is our real position, but doing a wink, wink to the gun lobby. So there are issues that are important. The child care is very important because Mr. O'Toole said he's going to rip up the agreements with the provinces. And yet in Quebec, it's a big issue where he can't really give an answer about what are you going to do with that $6 billion? The check's already been given to Mr. Legault. Now, the premier said that, don't worry, we can work that out. But that's a pretty big, you know, trying to paper over that is a big challenge. I think at this point for trying to spin that the child care program at the $10 a day, it actually is much more helpful to Canadian women and families than saying, you know, fix it on your tax return at the end of the year. So I think
the $10 a day is something that'll happen maybe 5 years from now. The difference between the Conservative plank and the Liberal plank on childcare is Justin Trudeau wants to give billions of dollars to provinces, and in Quebec's case, with no strings attached, where Aaron O'Toole wants to give the money to families to deal with their extra cost for childcare. So we are giving money directly to families, where Trudeau is giving them to the provinces. So it's quite, you know, it depends where you sit on this issue. And I think both will resonate with different parts of society, but I actually don't think anyone's voting on issue policy this election. I think it really, as Bill Clinton had two axioms about the election, right? It's about the economy stupid. If that's the case, Aaron O'Toole will win. But his other axiom is a presidential election is really like a job interview. And Canadians are being asked, who do you want to be the prime minister? Now, as I said before, if it's about pandemic, I give Justin probably will win. But if it's about economic recovery, who's going to lead us back to economic recovery, find those million jobs we need to find? I think that gives O'Toole the advantage.
Bill Clinton also had another saying, Bill, and it was turtles don't get on fence posts on their own. And that's an election for people. I mean, that's good government. Trudeau has been providing good government. You know it. I mean, this pandemic, nobody could have prepared for it. And now Canada's number one in the world.
If good government is just dishing money out the door to people that don't even need it, then that's good government.
This is the fun stuff. I want to make sure that we close on future governing majorities and what they portend for Canada-U.S. relations and trade. But just one more sort of horse race question. In America, we have a sense, especially after the last election, that polling is broken, that polling just doesn't work anymore. People don't answer their phones. They don't tell the truth to pollsters. Many people feel like they can't state their preferences openly. Let me hear from both of you, your view of does polling still work in Canada? And do you, as political professionals, trust it?
Look, I had a conversation with an eminent Washington person about Canada-U.S. relations the other day, and at the end of it, he asked me what I thought was going to happen in the election, and then his final sage advice to me was, Bill, don't put any faith in the polls. And I don't. We're obviously polling 70 ridings with a rolling poll. We're seeing trends, but I think it's a big mistake to look at all the pollsters' results at the national level and make any kind of prognostication what's going to happen. I think there's going to be a big surprise in this election, and I don't know which way it's going to go, but I totally agree with you, Peter. I think the polling system is a bit broken for the reasons that you talked about. And I also think in this election that, a lot of urban women who are answering pollsters they don't really know who's on the other end of the line. So they're not going to really say they're deserting Justin Trudeau. By the end of the day, they've lost trust in him and they are going to vote Aaron O'Toole. They just don't want their neighbors to know. So I think there could be a big surprise on election day.
No, Bill, they'll be voting because their husbands may be voting O'Toole, and they're going to make sure they vote Liberal to counterbalance that. I agree with Bill. I think polling today, and it's different from 25, 30 years ago, where IVR or the robo phone call polls, and especially if you're doing 3-day rolling where you're doing samples of 500, 800 people, it's really hard to say that that's an accurate snapshot, especially if it's spread across the country and you have X number of calls per province. All the pollsters today are trying to find that magic recipe of robocalls, focus groups, Facebook groups, of like where they're trying to pull people in and ask them like the 10 questions, because the standard who are you voting for the next election, press 1 if it's Liberal, press 2 if it's Conservative, and 3 blah blah blah. That system doesn't drill into what people are really thinking. And someone could say, as Bill said, I agree, some people will say one thing one day and go into the voting booth and do something different. So, but but that's what we've got, and parties have. So they have to do, it's at least a peek into the crystal ball of what's going on in voters' minds. And it may not be accurate, and we're all hearing different anecdotal stories from the campaign. But what's really going to happen? They always say the most important poll is on election day.
The unfortunate part about the polling industry is that the media, every media outlet hires their own pollster, and throughout the election they report on that. It really does make it into a horse race kind of reporting. And so the media don't really cover the issues anymore. They just cover who's up, who's down today. And it really is unfortunate for the voter. There's very few media outlets that really drill into it, like CPAC, which is the parliamentary channel here in Canada. It's much like your C-SPAN in the United States. They actually go out to ridings with the reporters. They spend an hour with members of parliament and candidates. And then they put on shows where they focus on riding after riding after riding. It's the only outlet that really gets into the local issues, the issues that make people tick, what people are thinking. Everybody else in the media, it's just about who's up today and who's down tomorrow. And it's kind of unfortunate that we don't have more. And that's maybe one of the reasons we have less focus on policy issues.
Yeah. I mean, we don't have a traditional Sunday, we don't have that traditional Sunday morning, Meet the Press, ABC, Fox News, and NBC, where, and we saw that during the presidential campaign, where they had people going into Iowa, into Idaho, into the Midwest and Ohio, trying to get the pulse of where people were, what's making them tick. And I mean, we have CPAC, and that's really been the only news source that does that. I mean, journalists today, it's really tough for them because, first of all, it's a shrinking industry. They're competing. Revenues obviously go to Facebook and Google and all those platforms. And so a journalist who goes to an event sometimes may even have to film it, tweet about it, and then write the print story. So it's, and that's why it's so much easier to watch cover the horse race.
Right. Bill, as the speaker from the conservative side, would love to hear you outline a scenario in which Mr. O'Toole wins a governing majority. What are the ingredients that you think could go into that, assuming that we don't see Liberals picking up the 16 seats? What's the scenario where he could be in the governing majority?
Well, I think that would have to be a big shift in Quebec, and obviously he'd have to win some seats in the city of Toronto to get a majority. There probably is a pathway there, but it's narrow. And I think if he has more seats, but in a minority situation, I think that the Prime Minister's days are numbered as leader of his party. And while the Liberals go through a leadership, which could take 18 months or longer, they would likely support confidence motions in the House just to keep away from another election while they were choosing a leader. So that's kind of how he'd govern. And I think you'd see a greater focus on Canada-US relations. I think you'd see a focus on trade and energy that would, I think, be helpful to the New England states. I think you would find that he would be, trying to solve softwood lumber finally, breaking through into the what the president is having to deal with will be difficult because he's pretty busy right now. But I do think you would find that he would focus on building a relationship with the administration, not only to solve bilateral issues, and there's many, but also, there's a G20 at the end of next month that he could be helpful to President Biden at that. There's obviously the COP meeting coming up. Again, I think Brian Mulroney, was very successful in his relationship with both Presidents Reagan and Bush 41, because he built very strong personal relationships. Obviously, the Reagan-Mulroney Irish relationship could be duplicated by the O'Toole-Biden Irish relationship. But Brian Mulroney became an advisor to George Bush 41 on many issues. And he helped them build coalitions around the world, because there's certain things Canada can do and say at multilateral organizations. And Joe Biden has made a commitment to become, to really go multilateral, unlike Trump. And so there are certain things we can do and say to other countries that the United States can't necessarily do, but are in the United States' interests. And he will once again make an attempt to really focus the president and the administration and Congress on North America, and North America being positive in the sense that whether it's energy or trade or many of the and even COVID. I mean, we've got to make an effort to solve COVID in the third world. And I know President Biden is going to be moving on that at the G20. Canada can be an ally to President Biden. So I think just because they come from different parties doesn't mean they can't get along and they can't achieve good things together for both countries.
Bruce, same question for you. Sort of the path to the Liberals assuming a functional majority.
It's the same path through Quebec. I mean, Quebec is vote rich, and if there's a swing or if the vote's split, Prime Minister Trudeau and the Liberals started at 155. And they only had to go 15 seats to get to the majority. And so the thinking always was that with Quebec, with the different policy decisions, that Quebec was a place where they could grow. I mean, Liberal parties, obviously Montreal, the island, and they do have seats outside, and Quebec City, of course, with Minister Duclos and Lightbound. But they also, they had seats in Eastern Townships, St. Maurice Valley, and the Gaspé. So they were looking at growing there. Trudeau did have seats up in the Saguenay region in his first election. And so they to get to the majority, Quebec would have to play an important part for sure. Just what I'll add to what Bill said about the Canada-US relations. Frankly, they're great Canada-US relations now, both our bosses have always said, and to us, that, you know, what are the two most important issues for any Canadian prime minister? It's how to handle the Canada-US relationship as well as national unity. And the Canada-US relationship, it is, as Bill said, the relationships between the prime minister and the president are super important. With Mr. Chrétien, obviously he and Bill Clinton hit it off, but Prime Minister Chrétien and George W. Had a very good working relationship. They had many calls, and apart from obviously the war in Iraq, where they had strong differences, but Canada still stepped up, whether it was on Afghanistan or some other military support. So, but you know, we have a situation where, you know, it was a difficult time in the last 4 years, I think, for Canada-US relations. But and there's always going to be trade irritants. It doesn't matter who's in power. There's always going to be challenge, like the softwood lumber thing. Isn't Bill can say O'Toole's going to fix it? He's not. Softwood lumber has been an issue that's been going on for decades. I think the Liberal government has done a great job. We have a fantastic Consul General in Boston who's working on all the New England files, and there's a great relationship too. Ministers, it's not just about at the top, but you also have ministers who work with governors. I mean, we all know that governors are the strongest lobby in Washington, and so the Canadian Embassy, of course, works that network very hard too with ministers in either side of the aisle.
So in our final 6 minutes, just would love to offer you a chance to offer any other thoughts about significant things that could change in U.S.-Canada relations based on the outcome Monday. We've obviously heard, you know, several, but anything else that you would point out?
Well, one of the things that I think Americans will like about an O'Toole government is that they are going to make the commitment to NATO and go to 2%. And we're also committed to modernizing NORAD, which I think is important on both sides of the border. I think that you will see, hopefully, Prime Minister O'Toole worked very, very hard to change Buy America to Buy North American, so that we can have an access for our companies to do great things in America for infrastructure and other programs that you'll have going. So I think that Prime Minister O'Toole will take a different viewpoint on energy. He will not see all energy projects as being bad, as this government has seen. And so there are some significant changes in the offing if Prime Minister O'Toole, if that becomes a reality.
Great.
I think that climate change is a big problem on energy, because then he'll be totally out of sync with President Biden and what's going on in the United States with targets for electric cars and all that sort of thing. I think what doesn't change, no matter who wins, is that, correct me if I'm wrong, our Canadian consulate people, but we're 35 states where Canada is the #1 trading partner with the US. That's not going to change. That's still going to be the same. And I think the pressure, the Buy American issue is one that confronts, I think, any government in Canada right now, and trying to sort of educate the importance of supply chains and how integrated Canadian companies are across the border. It's much easier for a company up in New England to deal with either Atlantic provinces or Quebec than it is to say, oh, we have to go to California or New Mexico to get parts. So, or whatever widgets needed in the supply chain. I think that, like I said, there's absolute synergies between the present Liberal government and the Biden administration, and those will continue under Prime Minister Trudeau. They, as I said, they have strong relations at the cabinet level as well as the prime ministerial presidential level, and working together. I mean, listen, NORAD modernization, that's a given, that has to happen, and then, working on multilateral. The world's changed now. We see a different China. We see a different Russia. We see a different play in the Middle East. So we have to work together as countries, and you know, we look at what we're able to accomplish on the North. We were modernizing our NAFTA 2.0. And that was a success, even with a wide range of governments negotiating, and we got there. And so kudos to, you know, Krista Freeland and her team and all those people who didn't sleep for weeks and weeks and weeks. And Lighthouser did a great job as well. And
The fundamental problem with Justin Trudeau in his Canada-US relations is he did have the first bilateral Zoom call with President Biden, but you know, out of that call came 30 plus priorities. And as anybody on this call knows who run a business or involved with government, if you have 30 priorities, you have no priorities. And so I think you'll find O'Toole will be much more sharper at defining the priorities and working on those priorities, working with congressional leadership, working with congressional caucuses, governors. I think you'll see a much more proactive approach to the United States.
Bruce, I feel like we got to give you one last word before we wrap everything up.
Thanks, Peter. That's all hypothetical, Bill. We don't know how Mr. O'Toole is going to be. We've seen him flip-flop all over the campaign, trying to please whoever he can to get votes. I would put Justin Trudeau and his team up any day against, we don't know who the team is with Aaron O'Toole, and he's barely been tested in government. And I think people will stick with we're in rough waters, and they're going to stick with the captain who's, running the ship right now, who's on the bridge.
I think it's just purely an election. Justin Trudeau got us through the pandemic, just as Churchill got us through the Second World War. But now it's all about economic recovery. And as you know, in Britain, they said, thank you, Mr. Churchill. We're going on with new leadership. And even Justin Trudeau uses that a great example. The pandemic's like the Second World War. I wouldn't use that if I was him. But I think that's where we're going to end up.
But what happened,
I just want to thank Rasky Partners for sponsoring this, and I want to thank the invitation from the New England.
He doesn't want to give me a chance.
And hey, that's what we teach people when we teach them how to deal with the media.
Drag the puck. But I'll say that, hey, don't forget, Winston Churchill came back because people weren't happy with what they got. So they learned
Let's just leave it at
I don't think Freeland and Carney are going to allow Trudeau to come back. But stranger things have happened.
Leave it at there is a very clear.
There's someone on this call who'd be a great leader.
There's a very clear choice on Monday. And thanks to Bill Pristansky and Bruce Hartley from Prospectus Associates, we have all learned so much about what goes into that choice. And Bill, you took the words out of my mouth. Big thank you to Rasky Partners and to Jeff Terry for sponsoring us today. Please, everybody, watch your email inbox for a follow-up event being organized by Andrew Holman from Bridgewater State and our board of directors coming up next Wednesday. Also, a big thank you to Susan Barber, Emily Clifford, Stephen Gillies from McKenna Management, who work with NECDC for getting us on this Zoom. So thank you, everybody, and especially thank you, Bruce and Bill. Lively, informative, interesting. Jeff Terry from Rasky, thank you for making it happen.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks for listening. And watch carefully next Monday night.
All right.
Hi, Bruce. Hi, Bill. Bye.
Okay. Bye, everybody. Thank you so much.
We'll close it down now, and thank you.